You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. I know that out there in what is laughingly known as the real world, it's Black History Month, but at the Women's Media Center, it's always Black History Month. It's always Women's History Month. It's always Asian American and Pacific Islander Month and Latinx Month. And what is this idea that you give the disenfranchised a month and then the other 11 months are pale male months? That's the reality, I'm afraid, but it's covered by a hypocritical monthing that we just don't observe. We're through composed. So Luvvie Ajayi, the author and blogger and activist and all-round good person and smart and funny one, is with us today as my special guest. She returns to the program, and we have lots of other exciting stuff, including a major new study on women and the environment and how environmental degradation and climate change has special and devastating impact on guess who. So we'll get to all of that. And there's good news as well. You have to look to find it, but it's there. We'll get to all that. But first, we need to go, you bet, inside the headlines. As I write these notes, the jury is still out in the Harvey Weinstein case. But famous, powerful men continue to topple once exposed to charges of what they've been getting away with for decades. For example, Gabriel Matzneff, the much-lauded French author who wrote and spoke boastfully for years about engaging in pedophilia, has finally been charged by a Paris court for promoting sexual abuse of children. The court set September 2021 for the trial, which will also scrutinize the actions of the French elite, who published his books, promoted his career, and helped him evade justice. Matzneff, 83, has been in hiding on the Italian Riviera, avoiding media since the first victim came forth, testifying that she had been only 13 when the then 50-year-old Matzneff preyed on her. For years he's been published by the distinguished press Gallimard, entertained by the Paris Deputy Minister for Culture, was awarded a seldom-granted lifetime annual stipend from the National Book Center, and won France's most prestigious literary awards. His reputation was brazenly based on being a transgressive figure, known for his books about sexual predation on pre-teenage girls in France and in sex tourism in the Philippines with little boys as young as 8. In a recent interview, Matzneff angrily defended himself, saying that he merely did and wrote openly about what many others did in secret, especially during and after the May 1968 countercultural revolution. I remember all too well in my young adulthood the glamour that attached to transgressives, if they were men. In a related story, it now comes out that in the years before his removal from ministry, Cardinal Theodore McCarrick secretly gave nearly $1 million to the Institute for the Incarnate Word, a controversial group of Catholic missionaries, and he also supported leniency for its founder after the Vatican punished him for sexual wrongdoing. Carlos Buela, who founded the group decades earlier in Argentina, repeatedly defied Vatican sanctions for sexual misconduct. McCarrick himself, once one of the most recognized figures in the U.S. Church, last year became the first cardinal known to be defrocked for sexual abuse. Independently but concurrently, Pope Francis has backed away from creating exceptions to his celibacy rules and put off a decision on allowing married priests in the Amazon. That change had been requested by Latin American bishops to address clerical shortages in remote areas of the Amazon, and would have been a major exception to Roman Catholicism's current priestly celibacy practice, itself a church tradition formally dating only from the 11th century onward, when inheritance disputes about property and land because of children grown in claiming their own became costly to the Church. And this only became a part of canon law as late as 1917. Meanwhile, the Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Protestant denomination in the U.S., has expelled one of its churches, Ranchland Heights Baptist Church in Midland, Texas, for employing a pastor who is a registered sex offender. John Philip Rutledge was convicted in 2003 of sexually assaulting two girls, age 11 and 12, according to the Texas Department of Public Safety. Local church officials admit they knew Rutledge was a registered sex offender before they hired him, but they believed that God had forgiven him. The Houston Chronicle and San Antonio Express-News found that 400 Southern Baptist leaders had been accused of sexual misconduct or crimes against more than 700 victims since 1998, and victims' advocates say that the denomination is still not doing enough to prevent abuse and hold leaders accountable. Southern Baptists have occasionally removed churches in the past, but for notably other reasons. A California church was removed in 2014, but for supporting same-sex marriages. There is some unadulterated good news. I know I promised you some. Well, for the first time, flagship law journals at top U.S. law schools, including Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Georgetown, Columbia, and Duke universities, are all led by women. Men still dominate the ranks of law firms and the federal judiciary and academia, but in recent years, the number of women enrolling in accredited law schools has exceeded the number of men, according to the American Bar Association, so there's hope yet. And the U.S. House of Representatives gave the Equal Rights Amendment a temporary new lease on life by voting to remove a 1982 deadline for ratification by the states. The 232 to 183 vote on a resolution introduced by Representative Jackie Speer, Democrat of California, pushes the issue to the Senate, where Senators Ben Cardin, Democrat of Maryland, and Lisa Murkowski, Republican of Alaska, have introduced a similar measure, but where McConnell, self-named Grim Reaper, will of course not let the bill come anywhere near the floor for a vote. And we end with a call to arms, or rather to the computer keyboard. The venerable New York Times was prodded by readers who complained that women were underrepresented in the letters to the editor pages. So a year ago, the Times began the Women's Project, aiming to correct the balance and report in February 2020. Well, here we are. And as of today, the tally is only 43% women and 57% men, numbers that have remained remarkably constant for several months. There are more women on the pages than in the past, but they don't have exact data from previous years. The Times has also done spot tallies of the much larger number of submissions. There, the percentage, when the writer's gender can be determined, is about 25 to 30% women, about the same as when the project started. Patterns were consistent. Men wrote the majority of submissions on politics, the economy, and foreign affairs. Women wrote mostly on parenting, health, education, and relationships. When the Times asked readers to name the book that most influenced their lives, a significant majority of both submitted and published letters were from women. This month, at the one-year mark, the Times is reaffirming its commitment to work toward gender parity, but can't do it without our help. They select letters, after all, only from those of us who send them in, so they are urging women and anyone else who feels underrepresented to write in from wherever you are. Make your opinions known to the newspaper of record. The email address is simply letters@nytimes.com. I'm passing it along because this is a potential power we can access easily, and when a door is opened even a crack, I say rush in. The New York Times appeal, published on February 16th, was followed by an editorial by Kimberly Probolos, whose letter to the editor had inspired the Women's Project a year earlier. This time she was addressing men. Quote, "Male readers of the New York Times, this is about you. You who call yourselves feminists and attend women's marches. You who coach your daughters' soccer teams. Yes, you are trying, but I'm struck by how spectacularly so many of you continue to fail at listening, this most basic of human skills. First, to be a good listener, stop talking. Second, active listening means hearing the words women are saying and taking them at face value, even if they contradict your prior assumptions or your own agenda. Third, being an active listener means asking questions." Close quote. She ends her thoughtful, bracing piece by writing that if the New York Times can do it, perhaps male readers can too. Letters at nytimes.com. It's time for a short break here, but lots more coming up, including things that you didn't know. Like, for example, did you know that 2020 is the 60th anniversary of the Year of Africa? The Year of Africa was a remarkable one in which 17 countries got their independence from Spain or Britain or some other colonial power. My guest today, who's coming up in just a bit, was born in Nigeria, and she wrote a piece in the New York Times recently celebrating the anniversary of the Year of Africa. So that's coming up and lots more else, and do not go away because right now, in just a minute, is the Surrealism Corner. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Don't you just know that if a male lawmaker is worrying that women will abuse a tax break to hoard tampons, we must be in the Surrealism Corner? Yes, you know I do not make these things up. Democratic lawmakers in Tennessee had proposed a bill to include tampons and other menstrual products in the state's yearly sales tax holiday, which is a 3-day weekend when residents can buy stuff tax-free. But State Senator Joey Hensley, a Republican, was very worried that this might lead to an out-of-control stampede spree of tampon buying. Quote, "Since it's a sales tax holiday, there's really no limit on the number of items anybody can purchase," he said, while citing only tampons as an example, not, say, tissues or soap or refrigerators. His remarks got nationwide coverage, with some questioning his grasp of the human menstrual cycle. Associated Press reporter Kimberly Cruz noted that his comment reminded her of the time NASA thought a woman needed 100 tampons for a week in space. This is part of a larger debate about the cost of tampons and pads, which can put them out of reach for low-income people, sometimes forcing women to miss work or school. Lawmakers around the country have tried to make tampons more affordable while lifting sales taxes on the products, noting that other necessities like bandages are already tax-exempt. This is part of a menstrual equity movement making such products affordable and accessible to all, a recognition that female people simply cannot go about daily lives or participate in the economy or society without reliable access to menstrual products. 5 states, including New York and California, have passed legislation requiring that tampons be provided free in public schools, and additionally, several states have passed bills requiring that the products be made available to incarcerated women. The group Period Equity, founded by Jennifer Weiss Wolf, author of the book Periods Gone Public, Taking a Stand for Menstrual Equality, has launched an initiative to push more states forward on this subject. As New York City Council member Julissa Farras Copeland put it when she sponsored a measure to make the products free in city schools, shelters, and jails, "These products are as necessary," she said, "as toilet paper, so they ought to be just as freely accessible." In the same general category of arrogance is a word I have just coined. It's a combination of ignorance and arrogance, and there's so many ways and times and usages for it these days. So, in the category of arrogance, Republican Texas Senator Ted Cruz gave an unwitting boost to an Alabama legislator's attempt to push back on restrictive abortion laws in her state. Democratic Representative Rolanda Hollis had introduced a measure to the State House earlier this month, intending it as a protest against the law passed by the Alabama legislature last year to outlaw abortion in virtually every case unless the life of the woman was at risk. Quote, "The responsibility is not always on the woman. It takes 2, close quote," Hollis tweeted, acknowledging that her long-shot House bill, which also would mandate a vasectomy after the birth of a man's 3rd biological child, was deliberately intended to neutralize the abortion ban bill. The issue would have faded into obscurity except for Ted Cruz, who waded in, exposing his own hypocrisy over reproductive legislation. "Yikes," he tweeted in response to Hollis's vasectomy bill. "Yikes, a government big enough to give you everything is big enough to take everything. Literally." That's the end of the tweet. Well, women in the Twitterverse went crazy, alluding to Cruz's opposition to government interference with male reproduction, while avidly supporting laws that dictate what women can and cannot do with our own bodies. Continuing with what appears to be patriarchy's surreal obsession with the female crotch, the television broadcast of the Academy Awards refused to air a commercial for a product claiming to help new mothers with painful urinary problems in postpartum recovery. TV shows and the networks themselves happily air graphic commercials about male hair loss and erectile dysfunction, but frequently refuse to carry commercials about so-called taboo subjects, that is, subjects that have a special impact on women, particularly down there. Some months ago, the feminine hygiene brand Thinx, that's Thinx, ran its first TV ad called Menstruation, with MEN in large capital letters at the beginning, and it depicted an alternate reality wherein men could menstruate. CBS rejected the spot, but 18 other networks did air it, including Bravo, MTV, E!, TLC, and NBC. Last, we come to the period. No, not the menstrual. The punctuational, the point, the full stop. It might be dying, alas. It's been used since the Middle Ages, but it gradually is failing under the barrage of instant messaging that's become synonymous with the digital age. The conspicuous omission of the period in text messages and instant messaging on social media is the product of the punctuation-free staccato sentences millennials favor, and it's a trend fueled by the freewheeling style online. David Crystal, professor of linguistics and an expert on original punctuation at Shakespeare's Globe Theatre in London, says, quote, "We're at a momentous moment in the history of the period," close quote. In fact, the understated period has suddenly taken on new meanings all its own. Today it's being deployed online as a weapon to show irony, sarcasm, snarkiness, annoyance, even aggression. As when you respond, okay, all right then, fine, period. Or to emphasize or make something explicit that's already implicit, as in writing, "I am not going, period," meaning I have no more to say. Professor Crystal says that the demise of the period, paradoxically, has been accompanied by floods of over-punctuation, as in the use of 5 exclamation marks following the word fantastic. I'm very fond of the period. It's one of the oldest forms of punctuation in written thought. So I'll continue to use it as long as humanly possible, because without it, nothing would really ever end, which would truly be surreal. Yes, I will miss it greatly if it goes. Period. Point. Full stop. Time for another quick break before the conversation. My guest this week wrote a beautiful piece for the New York Times 1619 series. I don't know if you've got hold of it, but do so if you haven't. It's just called 1619, and you can locate the entire series, which goes on through the entirety of this year, at the New York Times website. And it's basically the story of America, with parts left in that are usually cut. That is the entire history of enslavement upon which this country was built. It's like suddenly seeing the world in 3 dimensions instead of in 2 or even 1. Meanwhile, we'll be back in just a moment with Luvvie Ajayi, so stay with us. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
My guest for the conversation this week is Luvvie Ajayi, who is an award-winning author, speaker, and digital strategist who thrives at the intersection of comedy, technology, and activism. Her debut book, I'm Judging You, The Do Better Manual, became an instant New York Times bestseller. She's been blogging for 15 years at awesomelyluvvie.com, and there she covers everything from pop culture to race and politics. And she recently launched Rants and Randomness, a podcast where she also covers a wide array of subjects. Her work as culture critic and activist has brought her much attention. She was selected as a part of Oprah Winfrey's inaugural Super Soul 100 list, and she's a past winner of the Women's Media Center's Social Media Award. She's been featured by the New York Times, Good Housekeeping, Forbes, Marie Claire, Black Enterprise, The Root, and many more. And she's interviewed Oprah Winfrey, Gina Davis, and Shonda Rhimes. She is altogether awesome. And recently, the piece that she wrote for the 1619 series at the New York Times, memorializing 1619 as the year when the first enslaved Africans landed on the shores of the so-called New World, was a piece that reminded me just how terrific she is. But here, listen for yourself, and you'll see. Luvvie, welcome back to Women's Media Center Live. It's been too long.
It's been a long time, but I'm glad to be here.
I think the last time you were on the show, right after you had won the Women's Media Center Social Media Award for using your voice and your wonderful humor to amplify issues around gender and racial justice and other good things in general. I want to start with this just utterly lovely piece that you wrote for the New York Times, of all places, on the Africa, the motherland. You are, of course, Nigerian by birth, but it was celebrating 60 years of independence in countries all over the continent, and most Americans are unaware that this is the year of Africa. Most Americans don't even know it's a continent. Most Americans think it's a country. So talk about this lovely piece and what was behind it.
Yes, so I was invited to contribute to this special package because 1960 was the year of Africa, which is a year where 17 African countries got their independence from either Britain or Spain. So the New York Times wanted to do a commemorative piece because 60 years ago is not a long time. The fact that a third of the continent just got independence 60 years ago is something that we should probably reflect on. So my piece, I wanted to take on the thought of what it means for a continent to change so much in 12 months.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we are bogged down by what's happening in the world and how things sometimes feel overwhelmingly bad. And I'm thinking, the part of me, what I need right now above all else is optimism to move forward, because I feel like we always need some type of hope.
Yep.
So when I reflected on the fact that in 12 months, 17 countries could get autonomy in a continent that is considered the dark continent, what it tells me is swift change is really possible. It is sometimes unbelievable and surreal for us to think, you know what, we can win justice and we can make some type of progress. I think about stories like that.
It always drove me crazy when the kind of heaps of criticism would be poured on those African countries that went through periods of dictatorship. Because look at France and the French Revolution. I mean, and how it went to, how you could generously phrase it, extremes. When people have had no model of governance other than tyranny, how the hell do you expect them in 48 hours to turn it around? And in particular, when the colonizing powers managed to assassinate the visionaries like Patrice Lumumba, who were for a democratic vision and who were for a Pan-African vision, for that matter, which has never really worked. Do you see any hope for that in your visits home or your studies and your knowledge of the continent, of a Pan-African? I don't know what, not a country, but a union in ways other than fragile, or is it too early?
I think it might be too early, but I do think Pan-Africanism is something, it's a school of thought that doesn't ever go away. Sometimes it feels louder than other times, but I don't think it ever goes away. I don't think Africans ever think what we always need everybody else's help as like a group. With everything, African people are not a monolith,
Of course.
Pan-Africanism is something that I find is making a surge back, though, where even people who aren't African are seeing the power of the diaspora, seeing the power of the continent, and seeing that more stories need to be told. We also need to kind of look back at the history of countries in Africa as they overcome tyranny and reign and colonialism. And I think about how literally across the world, the things that we go through as people of color, as Black people, as a group that's a global majority, but still considered a minority in a way, they're so parallel. Like, people in Brazil are fighting for rights to be seen as full citizens. People in Australia are fighting to be seen as full people, as we're here fighting, the fact that police are killing Black men and girls every day.
Yeah.
So I think Pan-Africanism really is founded in the idea that our struggles are parallel. Our struggles are parallel, and the lessons that we learn from each other are necessary.
And there's another element as well, which obviously you and I are particularly fixated on, which is the emerging leadership in all those communities of women. Some years ago, I participated in a joint venture to compare racism and sexism in 3 countries: Brazil, South Africa, and the United States. And the tenor, the tone, the hope, and the practicality, my God, of the women in all those areas, this is specifically Black women, was breathtaking and very, very similar. From the townships from Gugalutu in South Africa to the favelas in Brazil, and certainly at home in the States, where I was more familiar with feminist Black leadership. So talk a little bit about that, because that is acres ahead of what is happening in any other community, certainly in the pale male community or the white community in general.
Black women have always tried to do the work that was necessary. And a lot of times we're not given the space to fully show up and lead. I think about Higher Heights, the organization that tries to build capacity building with Black political candidates who are women, and their hashtag is Black Women Lead. I think over time, people need to actually pay more attention to what Black women are doing, how we're voting, how we are standing up and speaking up and trying to create the change that we don't see happening.
Yeah.
For me, I think about the work of people like Audre Lorde and Ella Baker, people who history has not lauded as heroes. It's just recently that you're hearing their name, but they're integral. And from being thought leaders, like Ella Baker was integral in the civil rights movement and got very little credit for it.
Right.
So we just insist on keeping the work going and based out of a lot of the things that's happening. A lot of Black women are at the kind of like we're at the foundation of a lot of movements. We help build it, and then the people who end up getting credit are not us.
Yeah, well,
but the work is important.
Well, yeah, duh. The state of the Democratic slate as it is emerging has large patches of hair torn out from my head, because it started out actually looking a little bit like America, and the fact that it has wound up with 3 or 4 completely white, but also basically 3 pale males at the top is enough to make me completely crazy. Talk a little bit about that. My heart just sort of broke when Kamala was forced out of the race.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the country purports itself as being like, oh, we're going to be more progressive. And, on paper, they started as progressive based on the candidates that were in. Yeah. And next thing you know, all the candidates that feel progressive, that look different, that aren't the white men, are having to drop out. And then there's the Elizabeth Warren who's coming out with plans and policy that has sense and being thoughtful. And there's a whole narrative that she's unelectable. And things like that are incredibly frustrating, because it makes you say, what does progress look like, and what can it manifest as in a country that is so obsessed and so insistent on leadership, no matter how harmful it is, no matter if the males aren't even trying hard, no matter if they're just showing up and being like, I'm just here because I'm white and dude, and have done nothing and proven nothing and said nothing of note that's even intelligent or thoughtful that shows that they're ready to lead. So it's one of those, for women to be put in leadership positions, we have to get PhDs, master's degrees, 20 years of experience, prove we've never made a mistake, have a plan for every plan, and then a plan B for that plan.
That's right.
And then they'll say, you know what, be his secretary.
That's right. And do it all backwards in high heels, dance backwards like Ginger Rogers to boot. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's deeply frustrating. For me, I'm currently saving my brain space and frustration for about August.
Yes.
I'm doing what I'm kind of on the fringe of it right now. It's almost like I'm saving my anger and my rage and my analysis for after the primaries, because I was like, you know what, I'm going to conserve my energy right now.
That's so smart.
You don't need my energy right now.
That's very smart, actually.
I'm just going to conserve it, and then when it's time, when it's go time, then I'll be raging 24/7. But for now, I'm going to let y'all have it.
Well, talk about the ways in which you raise hell 24/7. Talk about the new podcast, and everybody should know. I think I mentioned it in the introduction, but I'll mention it again about your book, I'm Judging You, the Do Better Manual, which became an instant New York Times bestseller, and which is funny as well as inspiring. But talk about rants and randomness and all the other good stuff that you're doing.
Yes, I have a podcast called Rants and Randomness because, you know, for me, in media in general, and again, like in politics, white men's voices are constantly amplified.
Yep.
And they don't say like a lot of times the ones who are talking aren't saying anything of note. So I decided to start my podcast to talk about what I'm loving, what I am side-eyeing, and to have really good conversation with really good people. And my one rule for my guests thus far, I will not interview a white man. So my guests are everybody else. And most of my guests, though, are Black women, because I think above all, our stories are often not amplified and told.
Right.
And the people who I choose to interview are people who I find interesting, who have built careers that might not have existed 30 years ago, started their own companies, work in an industry that is odd. They are the ones who are loud-spoken troublemakers. They're the ones who, for me, inspire me to be better.
And how does it feel to have been on the cover of Essence? I mean, you're this famous person now. You were trending toward famous person when I first met you, but now you're this awesomely awesome famous person.
You know, that makes me uncomfortable. I consider myself visible, not necessarily famous, because I'm just like, my motive for the work that I do, for inspiring people, for just hoping people see me and they decide, you know what, I can have the life that I want or was too afraid to dream of, is never the fame of it all. Because that part scares me, because we live in a world now that actually realizes you if you're visible, because you can no longer grow in public.
That's right.
So I make sure that I try to stay grounded.
It's just that I got so excited when I saw you on the cover of Essence magazine.
That was wild. That was
quite thrilled.
Wild. Yeah, for my first ever magazine cover to be on the cover of Essence, it was a shared group cover which had like Shonda Rhimes on it and April Rain and Angela Rye. It was surreal. I think it was a culmination. It was one of those moments that I was like, even though sometimes this type of attention scares me, it was an affirmation that I needed to keep doing the work that I was doing.
It's an affirmation of your work. Exactly. I mean, in that sense, you don't take it personally, because it's what you're doing that matters. And that's what was getting the attention and being affirmed.
In the last couple of years, I've actually started talking more about therapy. The importance of going to therapy, because I think a lot of times our life shows up in ways that really shows what our traumas are, the things that we haven't dealt with. So now, you know, I don't do it in any formal way, but I think emphasizing the importance of therapy for us as women, as Black women, as people who exist in a world that does not respect you if you don't come in a particular package.
Yep.
Therapy's I think the next thing that I'm kind of like really passionate about.
Any new book on the horizon?
There is. I am currently writing book 2. So book 1 was the Do Better Manual, and book 2 is going to be the Fear Fighter Manual.
The Fear Fighter.
Yeah.
I
feel like my life and my story is a testimony of what happens when you do things that constantly scare you.
Yep.
But you insist on doing them anyway.
Yep.
And seeing all the magic that happens because of it. So
we used to say we used to say feel the fear and do it anyway. You don't have to deny the fear. You can say my hands are my palms are sweating, my fingertips are freezing, I'm cold, I'm nauseous, I can't stand this, and I'm going to do it anyway.
Yep.
You know, I mean, that's how things get done. I must say that every time I've sat at what was once a typewriter and now is my computer and been writing something that I thought, it makes me so vulnerable. Do I really want to go into print with this? And just trusted and done it. Suddenly, that's always usually the thing that calls forth hundreds of thousands of letters from women saying, you too, you know?
Yep.
It's daring that first cannon shot or that breaking the silence, and you do that all the time. I
call it being the domino.
Being the domino. I like it. I like it a lot. And when is this book out? When do we expect it?
It's going to be coming out in 2021. So I'm currently finishing the book right now. Like, that is my priority for the next few months.
Okay. All right. Well, when it comes out, you come back and talk to us about it. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Listen, I send you a big, huge hug. And keep on keeping on and listen to the podcast, folks, which is called Rants and Randomness, and I imagine is available on all the places you get your podcasts. And keep an eye out
everywhere where you get your podcasts.
And keep an eye out for the blog
Luvvie.com.
Luvvie.com, Luvvie, and she is precisely that. Big hug, and thank you again for being with us again.
Thank you for always having me on. Thank you for being one of the first people who championed my work, and your presence means a lot. Thank you.
Time for our final break, but I'll be returning in just a moment with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
Sometimes a major new report and scholarship can require and inspire fighting words. 3/4 of the world's ocean waters have sped up their pace in recent decades, scientists now say. A massive development that was not expected to occur until climate warming became much more advanced. The change is being driven by faster winds, which are adding more energy to the surface of the ocean. That, in turn, produces faster currents and an acceleration of ocean circulation. The increase in speed is most intense in tropical oceans, and especially the vast Pacific. The change was expected to peak at the end of this century with the winds, after vastly more warming than has happened so far. This suggests the Earth might actually be more sensitive to climate change than our simulations can currently show. On January 29th, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, typically known for tracking endangered species, published a new report chronicling how environmental degradation disproportionately hurts women. The researchers used more than 80 global case studies, more than 1,000 sources, plus feedback from peer reviewers. That makes it one of the most in-depth analyses of the complex linkage between violence against women and environmental degradation ever attempted. The findings confirm what we already knew or suspected based on experiential and anecdotal evidence. As well, the findings add remarkable data and insights. Policymakers, program developers, NGOs and activists, funders and plain citizens of the world, because it reveals the complex, interlinking nature of gender-based violence across three main contexts: access to and control of natural resources, environmental pressure and threats, and environmental action to defend and conserve ecosystems, and resources. Here are only a few samples from the comprehensive 272-page report. We know that women have less access to natural resources and face higher threats of violence when illegal loggers or fisheries come to their communities. At the same time, women face more direct consequences from such environmental threats, particularly if they choose or are forced to defend land and resources. For instance, we know that environmental defenders face high murder rates, especially indigenous peoples. Over the past 15 years, at least 684 individuals have been killed trying to protect their land. This threat is real for all environmental defenders, regardless of gender, but the report details how women are at extra risk. There have been 609 instances of aggression against Central American and Mexican women between 2015 and 2016 alone. Report authors also surveyed experts and found that 59% of respondents had observed gender-based violence related to environmental issues, including land rights and energy infrastructure. Women's roles in society can be weaponized against them if they engage in environmental activism and protection. The double burden that women face as mothers and activists has led some communities to label them bad mothers for leaving their children at home when off working to defend their environment and their communities. In some cases, women environmental defenders have had to contend with threats that their children will be taken away. Not only women who are activists are endangered, though. All women face environmental risks, especially in the global south, where extreme weather events are taking on new forms as the planet heats up. The warming of the earth is disrupting natural cycles that communities rely on to grow and search for food. In most parts of the world, women handle household duties and must manage food scarcity after extreme weather hits. When crops are wiped out, women are often left to deal with how to feed their children and their families. The stress of these types of situations also allows for domestic violence to thrive, especially in cultures where this behavior is acceptable. And that is most cultures. It may be subtle or blatant, but it's acceptable. There's also the specific risk female human beings face when they're displaced from home and become refugees. This exposes women, girls, and young children to human trafficking, for labor, for prostitution, even for organ selling. Violence is hardly limited to the developing world. There was an uptick in abuse after Hurricane Michael in 2018 in the United States, for instance. And for years, indigenous leaders in the U.S., Canada, and elsewhere have been sounding alarms on the dangers that oil and gas projects pose to local women, because these projects bring in outside men into tight-knit communities. Sexual violence, disappearances of the women, femicide murders, in fact, typically follow the creation of so-called man camps. Women are the water haulers and fuel gatherers of the world, and also the farmers. In many African languages, the word for female and farmer is the same. So competition over increasingly scarce and degraded resources exacerbates gender-based violence, and women are in the heart of that, the target. But there are glimmers of light. New research suggests scientists may have to bump up their estimates for present-day leakage from oil and gas drilling by 25 to 40%, and that is actually not terrible news. Because if oil and gas fields are leaking more than we thought, that means that stopping them, that could slow global warming and buy time right when the Earth needs it most. But then we'd have to do that, and do it fast. Do it now. And then, of course, there's women. That's our ace up the sleeve. Every major initiative toward environmental sanity in the last half-century has had its origins in women's activism, from Rachel Carson on up till today. The Greenbelt movement in Kenya, started by one woman, Wangari Maathai, planting trees and spreading across the continent of Africa and then the world. The so-called tree huggers of India, who mounted a massive forest protection mobilization to ensure the sustainability of trees whose fallen branches and twigs the women gather for fuel. The barefoot engineers of Southeast Asia, non-literate women training themselves and each other and then fanning out to install solar electricity grids donated to the region so that it can become electrified. The feminist coalition across 10,000 small Pacific Island nations who organized to stop nuclear testing, since they had made the connections between those tests and the precipitous rise in their bodies and their communities of cancers of the female reproductive system and of stillborn or deformed births. If you or someone you know has been resisting climate change activism because you fear you'd get depressed, or because the connections between the threat and the urgency and your own everyday life seemed somehow remote, I urge you to download this free gender-based violence report from IUCN.org. IUCN.org. Read it, share it, use it. You need to know the truths in its pages. Your life, no hyperbole, may depend on it. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at @TheRobinMorgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.